seasonal workers, and they were set up in gangs, and that it took at least 20 years. Now, Mark Lehner, whom I mentioned before, said that it took about 4,000 to 5,000 permanent staff members, and then 25,000 to 30,000 in shifts to build the pyramid. And over the years, that would be over 100,000 men, which is about the smallest amount that any have suggested. And his idea was that it was a 20-year period. Permanent crews, gangs, and files, what we call them. These are divisions with probably about 10 men in each. And all of these suggestions, as I said, fit into the time that's been allotted to the king's reign through our king lists. Now, fact number 6, I've actually been numbering these, is that none of these pyramids that you're going to see were ever built by slaves. Zahi Hawass, whom you heard speak here in April, showed you some of the examples from this slide. These are the tombs of the pyramid builders. So these are the ancient Egyptians who actually built the pyramids. I'll show you some more evidence of it. Now, one of the things you might be thinking of, and certainly a lot of people did, is this is a real vanity project, and it must have cost a good amount in order to construct it, such a funerary monument. And it not only interests modern people, it also interested the ancients. Now, the not too reliable Herodotus, again, repeated the otherwise unattested allegation that Khufu, in order to help pay for everything, forced his daughter into prostitution. This was in order to raise funds for his construction project. And then later, in Herodotus's report, he suggested that in the course of her strenuous task, this enterprising young lady demanded an extra block from each of her clients. And this was a way that she could build her own pyramid. Now, yes, it's written in history, but no, there is no evidence of any of the daughters of Khufu to have had pyramids. What we do have is one of his granddaughter's tombs, and this is just like the nobility what they would have had. And so here is the granddaughter of Khufu, and here are statues of her. So no pyramid, so much for this conclusion that Herodotus had. Now, one thing that in the pyramid complex that we do know is that there were other pyramids. And as you can see here, both in the lower slide and in the upper plans, that there were these subsidiary pyramids. A few of them belonged to some of the queens, and then one of them belonged to Khufu himself, and that was for his ka, or a spiritual element of him. Now, the pyramids, the Great Pyramid and the ones that immediately followed it, had an upper temple which was attached to the pyramid, and then a causeway that goes down to the valley, and there's a valley temple at the very end of it. And you can see this just being shown in the plan above. You can see right over here, moving down, this is where we're talking about. And here is this is the upper temple, and you can make out some of the floor pavement there. And this is a basalt, so this was incredibly beautiful when it was original. Now, the interior is no less a wonder than the exterior. Here are some of the chambers, which I should have told you about. There are 3 of them. And you can see some of them right here. We're going to talk in about a minute or so about this. But you can see that what I just mentioned to you, this is the Valley Temple. Here is the causeway down to this is the upper temple. The causeway is down here. And this is the upper chamber. This is the so-called Queen's Chamber. and then you have a lower chamber. So there are three. Now this is the upper chamber, and this is where the king was buried. That is his sarcophagus. Now there was nothing left when this was discovered, so this is what we assume to have been where he was buried. There are also these shafts that go up into the walls of the burial chamber, both the upper and the lower one. And two of them actually go straight out through the pyramid and then open up. Two others don't. And the ones that open up seem to go out to the polar stars. And that is something that I'll get onto in just a few minutes. Now, over here, this is the Grand Gallery, which we're going to see in just a minute. And then there are these little blocks that are over here that slid down to prevent any entrance once the pyramid was completed. But of course, as you know, that really didn't do very much. This is a real feat of engineering here. This is the burial chamber, and above it, you have these stress relievers, and these are to prevent any of the pressure coming down from the top so that this will prevent the pyramid from collapsing. What's very interesting that up here on the blocks are hieroglyphs, and in the oval area, that's the name of the king, and this gives one of the gangs of workers who were in there, and this is one of our early Egyptian graffiti. And it's showing you that it wasn't ancient aliens at all, it was the ancient Egyptians. The Grand Gallery, for me, is an absolutely breathtaking place. And this is the center of the pyramid, and as you walk up here, you look up at the ceiling, and you see that the walls come out and are sort of like the reverse of cantilevering. It's called corbelling, and it manages to keep everything intact, or at least up to this point. That I just showed you, the Grand Gallery, is 86 feet high, and going back to the sarcophagus of the king and the burial chamber, and this is one of those shafts that goes up, and this is the other of the shafts. And when you read some people's reports on the pyramids, they tell you that's for air for the workers, and that's now been disputed. The ones that you see here in the king's chamber penetrated to the outside. And this has been thought also to be where the space would be for the spiritualized essence of the king to be able to go up into the heavens to join the gods and be in his afterlife. And again, they're oriented toward the northern polar stars. Now, there are a few scholars who tell you that the Sphinx actually doesn't belong to Khufu's son, Khephren, or Khafre, but actually to him, Khufu. So I've put the Sphinx's face here, and then the other two on the other side, and I'll leave it to you to make a decision as to who the Sphinx belongs to. Now, one of the other wonders of this site, because there are many, are the boats. And over here you can see these boat pits, and then over here are two more. And this is when they opened them up. You can see one of them still is intact, and the other one they took out, and they put this together. And it is absolutely incredible. It took almost 60 years to reassemble it, and one man discovered it, and in one of my early trips to Egypt, I got a chance to meet him, and he was the most unassuming individual you've ever met. What's amazing about this is that it's 150 feet long, and that almost everything that you see, except for one of those oars, is original. Even the rope that lashed the wood together is original. It's absolutely incredible. Now, was he the first one to have such a vehicle? No. Actually, there are forerunners, like for almost everything else in this complex, and I'm only going to talk about two of them. And the first one is the boats. Now, what you're looking at are a few of the boat graves. There are actually 14 of them at the site of Abydos. And another Penn colleague, David O'Connor, who's now at the Institute of Fine Arts, his team discovered these at Abydos several years ago. And it's between a tomb that likely dates to the First Dynasty and a slightly later ritual enclosure, so it's about 3000 BCE. So we're talking easily about 600 years earlier. That's where this came from, and there were even earlier boats. Now, Khufu's pyramid itself derives from an earlier pyramid. And the one I'm going to show you is that of King Djoser. And you see his figure on the left, and you can see that's a seated statue of him, one of the earliest Egyptians to be shown with a mustache, by the way. And then you see him running the Jubilee below in his pyramid. And he built his pyramid structure at Saqqara. And it went through several stages. The last of it started out as a flat one, and then there were some steps put into it, and it winds up with 6 steps that you see here. Now, what is that supposed to mean? So I'm showing you 2 hieroglyphs that can mean rise, cause to arise, or even arise. And they may actually give us some clue as to what this step pyramid was supposed to be. And at the end of the hieroglyphic word, you can see that there is a sign that looks like that step pyramid. And actually, in some of the original ones, this is just a copy, it also has 6 steps. And it seems to be a monumental staircase for the king's heavenly ascent to join the gods. Now, on a close-up, I want you to take a look at the stones, because we just saw that with Khufu. Djoser's stones were tiny in comparison, and the reason was the architect was great. His name was Imhotep. He really was he was a brilliant man, but he didn't trust that this would be enough to support all of the weight. So earlier monuments were built of mud brick, so he built this monument out of stones that were the size of mud brick. Now, confidence in the construction method, however,